Good afternoon. We are the Group 1 and we will discuss our topic for today, which is the material or economic self.
People had a material self, in the words of William James, the Harvard psychologist and giant of the American intellectual scene in the late 19th century. The material self, according to William James, pertains to the objects, places, or even people which label mind. Such possessions are viewed as an extension of individuals' identities. The self is the manifestation of one's identity through his material possessions, and because of this material, people are easily identified as based from the clothes we wear, our houses, cars, and even our pets can serve as our identity. The material self objects help make the person, but they also show that person is made of. So, a material self is ito ay tumutukoy sa mga bagay na mayroon ka. Ito yung mga bagay na matatawag mong sa'yo mismo, and it includes tangible objects like shoes, clothes, car, phones, lands, and many more. In this modern world, it is evident how people value material things more than the essence of life. So, kung atin napapansin, parang yung mga tao ngayon is nagiging materialistic na mas tinutuon nila yung mga pera nila, or mas binibigyan nila ng importansya yung mga material things kaysa sa mga kailangan nila sa buhay. So, for example, people in the society can easily judge you by just looking at the brand of your clothes, whether it is fake or original. So, doon sa example is parang base lang sa kasuotan mo o sa mga material things na meron ka, is parang madali lang sa tao na i-judge ka or kilalanin ka. So, para sa akin is ito ay may masamang dulot or may masamang epekto sa pamumuhay ng tao, dahil parang yung mga tao is not everyone is capable or not everyone is financially capable para matustusan yung mga bagay na gusto nila. Yung mga bagay na gusto nila is hindi nila mabibili dahil nga hindi sila mayaman. So, yung ibang tao is parang gumagawa pa ng paraan para lang makabili or makasunod sa uso, kahit kapalit pa nun is wala na silang makain or mangutang pa sila. For me, kahit fake man ang gamit mo, as long as marunong ka kung paano ito gamitin ng maayos, and it reflect na rin sa pagkatao mo kung paano mo pahalagahan ang gamit na mayroon ka kahit hindi pa original ito. Another example is pag-aalis tayo, parang kailangan pa natin maglaan ng mahabang oras para lang masatisfy tayo sa kung anong itsura natin, sa kung anong mga susuotin natin, at sa kung anong ipapakita natin sa society. Dahil takot tayo sa sasabihin ng ibang tao, which is mali, kasi dapat hindi tayo nakafocus sa kung ano yung mga sasabihin ng tao. And it is important to have a clear set of priorities. It is fine if you don't have expensive clothes to fit in a group. It is hard to be pretentious and putting up a fake self-image so people will love you. Ang hirap magpanggap na gawin ito dahil yun yung gustong makita ng mga tao sa'yo. Psychologists who study the impact of wealth and inequality of human behavior have found that money can powerfully influence our thoughts and actions in ways that we are often not aware of, no matter what our economic circumstances are. According to Curtis 2017, manifested that cash can have serious bearing on one's belief regarding the way a person views himself or herself. Evidences behind the idea that money truly can change people. First is a social business value. Surmise that there are two motivations of completing a given task. The first is social. By recognizing a task, social value, a person sees worthy investment of time and a part of his of or her social duty, and he or she is usually happy to help out. When money is offered as the motivation, however, people then start thinking less of the social aspect and more about the business value. 2004. So, dito sa social and business value, parang yung goal mo as a person is um, magampanan lang yung duty mo sa society. But kapag napag-usapan na or kapag may kinalaman na yung pera, is parang yung goal mo, yung set of goal mo is naiiba and nakafocus ka na lang sa pag-earn ng money. Kaya mas and people then start thinking less of social aspect and more about business value. And so, dahil nga mas priority mo na yung pag-earn ng money kaysa sa pag-help sa society, is yun doon pumapasok yung business value. Next is the self-sufficiency and service. Those who are conscious of money typically strive to be more self-sufficient than those for whom money isn't priority. When given a very difficult and even impossible task, when instruction that help was available, it was the money-related group that seemed the most intent on getting the job done alone, even when it was not possible to finish the task solo. It it only means that money-conscious individuals are more self-sufficient than their peer, particularly when money is made the focus. So, dito is parang pinopoint out dito na yung money is nag-serve as a motivation para magawa mo yung mga gawain, and kahit imposibleng gawin na mag-isa ka lang is nagagawa mo dahil alam mo na kapag nagawa mo yung task is may marireceive kang money kapalit nung pag-complete ng task.
Third evidence behind the idea that money truly can change people, according to Curtis 2017, is self-view. Self-view is defined as the amount one earns could have an effect on how he or she views both himself or herself and others. The wealthiest people are those with the deepest sense of class essentialism, where class essentialism is defined as the idea that differences between classes are based upon identity and genetics rather than circumstances. Where poor people tend to believe that social class was not related to genes, that essentially anyone can be rich and anyone can be poor. While rich people were more likely to believe that wealth was part of genes and identity, that they were entitled to wealth based upon their personal circumstances and actions. Wealthy people also believe that, more or less, life is fair and people mostly get what they deserve. If we will explain this on a simple phrases or sentence, ang self-view ay kung paano natin kinikilala o tinitingnan ang ating sarili based sa kung anong mayroon tayo, specifically money, where it is one of the main evidences why people tend to change their view about themselves. When they have a lot of money, or sometimes they feel that they are wealthier than the others. Based on the statement about self-view, poor people tend to believe that social class was not related to genes, that essentially anyone can be rich or anyone can be poor. Or sa madaling salita, hindi nakabase sa pinagmulan mo ang magiging estado mo sa buhay sa hinaharap o sa kasalukuyang panahon. They tend to believe that kasi hindi naman sila namulat sa marangyang pamumuhay, and because of that, they always believe that you can be rich someday if you will work hard. At kung hindi mo rin hahayaang ang iyong sariling manatiling maging mahirap, kung kaya't kinakailangan mo magsikap para may maabot ka sa buhay sa hinaharap. On the other hand, ang mga taong namulat sa marangyang buhay ay naniniwalang ang kayamanan o wealth ng isang tao ay parte ng genes at pinagmulan o pagkakakilanlan mo. Naniniwala silang ang pagiging mayaman ng isang tao ay base sa kanilang kalagayan bilang isang tao o individual at sa kanilang actions. It is very obvious on why these rich people believe on that things kasi hindi naman nila naranasang maging mahirap dahil ang pagiging mayaman ang kanilang kinagisnan at kinamulatan uri ng pamumuhay. And lastly, wealthy people also believe that more or less life is fair at kung ano ang nararapat sa iyo ay deserve mo ring makuha kasi ang mga mayayamang taong tulad nila ay hindi kailanman naranasang pagkaitan ng mga bagay na sa tingin nila ay nararapat na mapasa kanila. The next evidence is ethics, where those who perceive themselves to be in a higher class were the most likely to engage in unethical behavior, particularly when a symbol of wealth was introduced, such as cutting off a pedestrian when in a luxury car, for example. Piff, in his study, labeled the behavior self-maximization, an idea that suggests that those who have the most money by higher classes are more likely to take a what's in it for me attitude. They actively work toward the most benefit for themselves. Dito naman, it explained that kung sino man ang mga taong kinukonsider o nabibilang sa mga higher classes, sila yung tipo ng mga taong hindi na alam o nakakaligtaan sa kung ano nga ba ang nararapat na gawain ng isang tao o ethical behavior. Kadalasan, sila din yung mga taong takaw gulo kung tawagin lalo na kapag nasa isang syudad o community sila napupunta. Ang pagkakaroon kasi ng ganitong kaisipan o mentality ay hindi nakabubuti para sa isang tao dahil sa masyado na nilang kinukonsider ang kanilang sarili bilang mas nakaangat sa iba, nakakalimutan na rin nila ang maging isang tao o pagpapakatao at minsan hindi nila napapansin na hindi ito nakabubuti para sa kanilang sarili, gayon din sa ibang tao. Example for this is to those people na kapag nasa public places at may nakikita o nakikilala silang tao na sa tingin nila ay hindi sa kanila belong o feeling nila hindi nila siya o sila kauri o kapareha ng estado. They tend to make actions na makapagpaparamdam doon sa taong yon na hindi siya nararapat sa lugar na yon. And it's very unethical behavior. And it should be avoided, not just for that kind of people, but it should be avoided by all of us. We must always take action that is considered ethical at hindi nakasasama sa ibang tao. The last evidence is addiction. Many addictions begin because a person gets a positive response from a certain type of behavior, whether it's a happy feeling that one gets from shopping or a thrill that comes from gambling. Actively seeking out behavior again and again for the same outcome can trigger an addiction. This is called behavioral or process addiction, a compulsive behavior not motivated by dependency on an addictive substance but rather by a process that leads to a seemingly positive outcome. So dito naman, most people gets addicted with money because they consider this as a comfort, like shopping and gambling. They find a happy or positive feeling when they are doing these things. And most of people who get addicted to money tend to work and do different things just to earn money. Kasi feeling nila ang pera ang makapagpapagaad sa kanilang buhay. And because of that, they tend to love the money more than the people who are more important to their lives.
Possession and the extended self. Possession. Ano nga ba ang unang pumapasok sa isip natin? Clothes ba? Money? O ano sa inyo naisip nyo? Una, ano nga ba ang possession? Possession is state of having, owning, or controlling something. Kaya naman, the premise that people regard their possessions as part of themselves is not new. Hindi na ito bago sa atin. Parte na ito ng pagkatao. If possessions are viewed as part of self, it follows that An unintentional loss of possessions should be regarded as a loss or lessening of self. Meaning, kung part ng self natin ang possession, what if kung nawala ang isang possession natin, may nabawas sa pagkatao natin? Ayon kay Goffman, noong 1961, provides a true review of the evidence of deliberate lessening of self manifested in such institutions as mental hospitals, homes for the aged, prisons, concentration camps, military training camps, boarding schools, and monasteries. So it means may mga institutions pa lang nagpapakita ng lessening of self. One of the first steps in receiving new members into these institutions is to systematically deprive them of all personal possessions, including clothing, money, and even names. Their bodies may be standardized to some degree as with military haircuts, and their behaviors and conversations may be severely restricted. They are reissued standard wardrobes and minimal possessions to aid in rebuilding a new standardized identity. The result of this systematic substitution of standardized identity for former possessions is an elimination of uniqueness, based from Snyder and Promkin, 1981, and a corresponding and often traumatic lessening of the individual's sense of self. Although the new, more standardized possessions that are substituted may eventually restore some sense of self, the new self should necessarily be less unique and involve more of a shared group identity. Another instance in which non-voluntary loss of possessions may bring about a diminished sense of self is when possessions are lost due to theft or casualty. So, kung kanina, lessening of self manifested in institutions, ngayon naman, loss due to theft or casualty. Dito na pumapasok yung case of burglary victims, sina Rosenblatt, Walsh, and Jackson, noong 1976. Sinadjust nila na ang process of grief and mourning may follow the discovery of theft, just as one might grieve and mourn the death of a loved one who had been a part of one's life. What is lost in both cases may be a part of self. So, sinasabi dito na ang loved one ay part ng possession natin, but it can lost due to theft or casualty. Base na nga sa sinabi dito, just as one might grieve and mourn the death of a loved one who had been a part of one's life. About sa handbag snatching naman, it can produce not only a financial but also an emotional long-term effect on victims. Kasi naman, what if kung nawala yung picture ng ating mahal sa buhay na nakalagay sa ating purse? It may cause the victim's sense of security impaired. Kaya naman they tend to distrust and feel suspicious towards other people and develop a fear of walking in public and even in familiar environments. So, pumapasok na dito yung na-discover nung research. Research has also found that victims sometimes describe possession as having high sentimental value and being much more than functional. Victims perceive their belongings as an extension of themselves. So, they feel the loss as a threat to their self-identity, which elicits strong negative emotional reactions. By Dennisman, noong 2017.
There are also reports on feelings of loss of a part of self among victims of natural disasters. MacLeod in the year 1984 found that those who lost possessions to a mudslide went through a process of grief similar to that of losing a loved one, moving from denial to anger to depression and finally to acceptance. So, sinasabi dito na once you lost your possessions, it affects you or gives you a big impact in your life since nga those possessions are considered as part of yourself. So, it is possible na you grieve, mourn, or malulungkot ka ng sobra na parang nawalan or namatayan ka ng family member, friends, or anyone na important sa'yo. Basically, at first, syempre, hindi mo matanggap. Magde-deny ka na hindi yon totoo. And eventually, madedepress hanggang sa you fully accept it. In addition to this, according to the article entitled Possessions and the Extended Self of Belk, MacLeod found that after 6 weeks, most victims were still in the early stage of grief and often could not talk about the disaster or cried while attempting to do so. So, it means na it takes time para ma-accept mo yung nangyari. The fact na part of yourself ay nawala, your possessions, maybe it takes a lot of months or a year for you to fully accept it. Our immediate family is part of ourselves. Our father and mother, our wife and babies, are bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. When they die, a part of ourselves is gone. Clearly, what is mourned is loss of self, as material property is an extension of the ego, and any interferences with our property is, for this reason, felt to be a violation of the person. If they do anything wrong, it is our shame. If they are insulted, our anger flashes forth as readily as if we stood in their place. So, next is immediate family. It can also considered as our extended self. Our father, mother, and siblings hold another important part of ourself. Lahat ng ginagawa nila ay nakakapekto sa atin. When our immediate family member dies, part of ourselves dies too. When their lives are in success, we feel their victories as if na parang tayo yung nanalo. In failures, we put to shame or guilt. So here parang one cannot live without the other. They are the reason behind kung bakit ginagawa natin yung mga bagay na alam nating makakapagpasaya sa kanila para ma-feel nila na proud sila sa atin and something like that. And when they happy, we also become happy. When there is a problem in the family, we are affected. And when they are in the disadvantaged situation, like nabubuli, inaaway, naiinsulto, there is an urgent to help, like it is your voluntary instinct of saving oneself from danger. The feelings of your family and your family itself becomes part of you. Parang there's always something emotional attachment para sa family mo, and that makes them as your extended self. Our home comes next. Its scenes are part of our life. Its aspects awaken the tenderest feelings of affection, and we do not easily forgive the stranger who, in visiting it, finds fault with its arrangements or treat it with contempt. All these different things are the objects of instinctive preferences coupled with the most important practical interest of life. So, home is another considered as extension of ourselves. Home is where our heart is. Ito yung place na nag-witness ng lahat ng pinagdaanan mo, the ups and downs of your life, the success and failures, your moments with the family, and many more. Our experiences inside the home were recorded and marked on particular parts and things in our home. You may imagine yourself about 10 years from now standing in front or inside of your house that you used to live, the house that where you are right now. And I am sure that you will reminisce your childhood, happy and sad moments you shared with your family, the memories and all your experiences through the years inside of that home. That's why may mga instances na mahirap talaga para sa family na iwanan yung nakasanayang bahay because they are really attached to it. Parang hindi nila kayang i-let go yung naging witness ng lahat ng pinagdaanan nila. We feel like ourselves is incomplete or there's a part of ourselves that is missing when we are outside or away to our home. So, diba, there are times na when we are in school or work, parang gusto nating umuwi agad. Kasi we know that our home is the only place where we feel comfy and nagagawa natin talaga yung gusto nating gawin. So that's why home is also considered as our extended self. There is a connection between wealth and well-being, a belief that fits what Juliet Score in 1998 calls the cycle of work and spend, work more to buy more. The level of consumption is set mainly by people's choices about how much to work and therefore how much income to earn. The individual chooses between hours at work, which yield income, and leisure, a good in itself but a costly one because it entails foregoing income. After working so hard, they feel deserving of their consumer comforts and luxuries. Indeed, consumption is the major form of long hours and hurried pace of work, and consumer expenditures have become a means by which people with frenetic lives keep it all going. Whether it's stress busters like vacations, massage, or restaurant meals, the contracting out of household services, or the purchase of time-saving commodities. So, it is all about the theory of Juliet Score. She came up with a cycle called work and spend cycle because of her observation among Americans. Though her study is about Americans, it is somehow applicable for all people, not just in United States but in all the country. So, sinasabi dito na parang yung quantity of your work is based on the quantity you want to spend. Since you possess something like material goods or activities that involves money, then you work for it. You work just to get it. And if yung halaga ng possessions na yon is high or expensive, then you are triggered to work extra hard or work in increasingly long hours just to reach the amount of that possessions. So the tendency is you don't have any more leisure time. So somehow I think this is the negative side of having possessions. Because imbis na you have your leisure time or quality time for your family, for yourself, or for recreational activities or what, ang nangyayari is you spend your time in your work because you want to reach your possessions, because you want to have the amount of money to get your possessions.
Special cases of extended self. In this section, several unique areas of consumer behavior that are affected by such self-extension are considered: collections, money, pets, other people, and body parts. The first one is the collections. I shop, therefore I am. Belt notes, humans and animals once primarily assembled collections of necessities for future security, but today, humans more often assemble collections of non-necessities for distinction and self-definition. Collections of this sort may be initiated by gifts or other unintended acquisitions, but the cultivation of a collection is a purposeful, self-defining act. This means that in the past, people tend to collect things that is only needed for their security, but today, people often collect even non-essential symbolic items to shape their distinction and self-definition. Collecting has become a significant activity in our consumer society as it has become more widely affordable to the discretionary time and money available to the general population rather than just to the wealthy elite. The meaning of this is that collecting items become more affordable commensurate with the time and money spent and can be used by the general population and not just by certain elite groups that creates and produce valuable and lasting contribution. Goldberg and Lewis go further in suggesting that many collectors who are inhibited and uncomfortable in social interaction surround themselves with favored objects upon which they project human-like qualities. They practically talk to these objects, they find comfort in being with them, and regard them as friends. In this sense, collections may be seen as transition objects or security blankets for adults. The meaning of this, many collectors tend to collect objects which they portray as certain possession that influence their behavior towards their surroundings. To some extent, a compulsive tendency urges them the increasing desire to collect as much as they could, which gives them a greater feeling of security and therefore becoming a basis of the sense of self and identity. I shop, therefore I am. I have, therefore I am. In modern society, this means that the public focus on what they all have rather than who they are. They have a greater feeling of happiness and security with their material possessions and social image rather than their inner personal attributes. To them, the essence of material possessions is highly regarded.